The alien delegation had been warned about human recklessness, but nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to witness on the lakeshore that bright afternoon. The air was crisp, the sky a pure blue, and the alien envoy in their shimmering protective suits were still adjusting to Earth's atmosphere when they spotted their human host running barefoot across the wooden pier. To them, the sight was horrifying. He wasn't armed, wasn't armored, and seemed to carry none of the equipment one should need to confront the deadly body of liquid before him. Instead, he grinned, stretched, and launched himself into a headlong dive toward the rippling surface below. The alien leader, Counselor Vorthin, hissed sharply through his breathing mask as the human broke the water with a splash. Their translation modules struggled to interpret his words, but the message was clear. He is dead. Surely dead. No being can survive that. His companions clutched their scanning devices, monitoring the chemical composition of the lake with increasing alarm. The water readouts displayed high salt levels, unfamiliar microbial life, and an unclassified level of turbidity. To them, immersion in such a medium was madness, a guaranteed sentence to infection, poisoning, or dissolution. Yet the human remained submerged. Seconds ticked by, each one stretching painfully long for the delegation. They whispered among themselves, their luminous green visors flickering as their systems cross-referenced galactic databases. Water, especially unfiltered planetary water, was one of the most feared hazards among starfarers. On their homeworld, exposure to untreated liquid would dissolve tissue within minutes. Most species in the Concordia treated water as a resource to be handled only in sterile facilities, filtered and ionized until every molecule was cataloged. For anyone to willingly throw themselves into such an unknown element was unthinkable. Yet the human resurfaced, laughing. His name was Daniel, and he had agreed to be Earth's cultural ambassador in the first informal meeting with these visitors. The delegation expected grand halls, sterile samples, and perhaps a demonstration of Earth's technology. Instead, Daniel had insisted they come with him to the lakeside near his childhood town. He wanted them to see humanity in its truest form, not in laboratories or war rooms, but in leisure and joy, in the simple act of plunging into cool water on a summer's day. The aliens gaped as he shook droplets from his hair and called up to them on the pier. "Come on in, the water's perfect." The aliens recoiled at his words as though he had suggested they leap into molten rock. Counselor Vorthin snapped back, "You jest. This body of fluid teems with microscopic predators. Its salinity alone is fatal. You cannot truly survive such contamination." But Daniel only grinned wider, spreading his arms across the surface as though lying in the embrace of something harmless. This is nothing. We grew up in it. Lakes, rivers, oceans, you name it, we swim in it. It's how we cool off, how we play, how we live. It's not poison to us. It's home." They exchanged horrified glances. The youngest among them, Envoy Narell, adjusted his voice synthesizer and asked hesitantly, "And you, ingest it? Let it touch your eyes, your skin, your insides?" Daniel nodded, flipping backward into the water with practiced ease, disappearing again under the waves. The aliens trembled as they watched bubbles rise from beneath, convinced that surely this time the reckless human would be claimed by the toxins. But again he returned to the surface, exhaling triumphantly, and even spitting a playful spray into the air as though taunting death itself. By now, the delegation's instruments had reached panic-level alerts. Toxic markers flared. Warning symbols cascaded across their HUDs, and automated protocols urged immediate withdrawal from the vicinity. The systems, programmed by generations of aquatic-fearing civilizations, screamed that they were witnessing a suicide ritual. And yet there Daniel was, floating on his back, eyes closed, utterly at peace. His chest rose and fell steadily, the sunlight gilding his form, the water cradling him without harm. It was not a death ritual. It was something else entirely. Something the aliens struggled to define. Envoy Narell whispered, "Perhaps his species has evolved immunities we cannot comprehend. Perhaps his body neutralizes toxins at a rate beyond biology." Another alien, more cynical, muttered, "Or perhaps they are insane, thriving by sheer accident, dancing constantly with extinction." Counselor Vorthin said nothing. His mind spun as he watched Daniel climb back onto the pier with effortless grace, droplets trailing down his muscles. This was no accident. This was confidence, born of generations who had not only survived in lethal waters but celebrated them. The implications rattled him to his core. Daniel noticed their silence and softened his tone. "I get it, you see danger everywhere. But to us, this isn't danger. It's life. It's where we learn to fight currents, to hold our breath, to leap without hesitation. It's why we're explorers. Why we dared to step into the void of space. If we can handle this, something that would terrify most species, you can imagine how far we'll go when the stakes are even higher. His words, calm yet filled with conviction, left a ripple in the delegation's thoughts deeper than the lake itself. One of them recorded everything, transmitting live data back to their command vessel in orbit. Already questions and alarms flooded the higher council. Were humans truly so resilient? Did they thrive in elements universally considered hostile? Or was this a performance, an elaborate attempt at intimidation? The delegation themselves weren't sure anymore. All they knew was that their host had demonstrated a casual defiance of nature's rules, rules that bound most species in chains of caution and fear. Humanity, it seemed, didn't just break rules. They swam in them. The breeze carried the scent of pine and water as Daniel stood at the pier's edge once more. He glanced at the delegation, who now looked like statues in their rigid suits, afraid to even step closer. He chuckled softly. "You don't have to join me," he said kindly, "but maybe someday you'll understand. For us, diving in isn't madness, it's freedom." He raised his arms, bent his knees, and dove again into the sparkling water, leaving the aliens to watch, stunned, as his figure vanished beneath the surface. The aliens remained on the pier, their boots creaking softly against the ancient wood as they shifted uneasily. For them, the world below the surface of any liquid was a place of monsters and decay, where unseen organisms could strip flesh from bone in moments. To watch Daniel disappear beneath the water again was like witnessing a comrade willingly step into a predator's mouth. Yet no predator came. Instead, the surface rippled, and moments later Daniel's laughter echoed as he burst back into view, water cascading from his hair. The humans who had gathered nearby cheered as though this act was the most normal thing in the world. Counselor Vorthen's voice carried the weight of disbelief as he muttered, "They celebrate contact with death." His assistant, Envoy Saren, leaned closer to the pier railing, scanning the depths with a trembling sensor rod. "There is life everywhere," Saren whispered. "The readings indicate countless microspecies, some even with acidic enzymes. It is chaos, yet they appear to swim unharmed." His trembling hands lowered the sensor as though admitting defeat. Nothing in the data aligned with what their eyes insisted was true. Daniel clambered onto the pier again, this time hauling himself up with raw strength, droplets flinging off him like liquid diamonds. He grinned, aware of their apprehension, and asked, "You don't swim at all, do you? Not even in your homeworld seas?" Counselor Vorthen's helmet tilted sharply and his tone came out harsh. "To immerse oneself willingly is suicide. No being with sense would abandon air for choking fluid. To us, the oceans are graveyards, not playgrounds." The words carried centuries of cultural dread, but Daniel only shook his head and leaned closer with a playful smirk. "Maybe that's why we're different." The delegation stiffened at that. "Different?" Neril repeated, unsure if it was an insult or truth. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, we humans grew up fighting against nature itself. Water wasn't safe, it was dangerous. We lost people to it. We feared it. But we didn't stop. We learned to float, then swim, then dive. We turned something that could kill us into something we mastered. And the more dangerous it was, the more determined we became. That's us in a nutshell." His eyes glinted as though daring them to deny it. The aliens processed this in silence, their minds replaying every story they had ever heard of human audacity, crossing frozen landscapes, scaling mountains without wings, leaping into voids with only cloth strapped to their backs. Perhaps this water ritual was just another chapter in that narrative. Envoy Neril finally asked, "But why? Why would a species seek danger, not avoid it?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, then crouched near the pier's edge. "Because danger teaches us. It reminds us we're alive. It shows us what we're made of." A group of local children suddenly arrived, running barefoot down the pier. Without hesitation, they leapt into the water, shrieking with delight as they splashed one another. The aliens gasped as the youngsters vanished under the surface and reappeared with wide smiles. Vorthen flinched as though witnessing mass slaughter. "Even your offspring? You subject them to this madness," he demanded. Daniel chuckled warmly at their horror. "Of course. That's how we start. We learn to swim before we can read. Our parents teach us how not to drown, how to push ourselves past fear. It's a rite of passage." Envoy Saren staggered back, clutching his data reader. "This explains much," he said, voice trembling. "Your species does not simply endure hardship. It seeks it deliberately. You cultivate survival through exposure. No wonder your history is filled with wars, exploration, conquest. Where we build shields, you dive in naked." The thought unsettled him so deeply that his armored form shuddered with unease. For the first time, he saw not madness but terrifying consistency in human behavior. Daniel dove once more, this time swimming farther out, cutting through the water with easy strokes. The children followed, laughing as if racing him. From the pier, the aliens tracked his glowing heat signature beneath the waves, watching as he stayed submerged far longer than seemed possible. Their instruments screamed warnings: oxygen deprivation imminent, drowning probability 90%. But still, Daniel moved with power and control. When he finally rose, he raised a triumphant hand, shouting something to the children that made them cheer. The delegation had no words. Counselor Vorthen turned his gaze skyward, his mind racing. This single act had revealed more about humanity than all the reports compiled by their intelligence services. They were a people who defied their environment, who refused to bow to what nature dictated. In his mind, he compared it to space travel itself, the leap into the black void where oxygen was scarce and danger was infinite. To the Concordat, it had taken millennia of careful steps, each shielded and cautious. To humans, perhaps it was just another lake to dive into. Envoy Narell asked quietly, "What if they apply this same madness to the stars? What if they treat every hostile world as another lake to master?" His words lingered in the salty air, heavy with implication. Sarin added, "Then they will not just survive. They will expand beyond measure. Nothing will stop them." Counselor Vorthen gave no reply. His eyes followed Daniel, who swam with unshakable joy, as if teaching the universe itself a lesson. For the first time in his long life, Vorthen felt both awe and fear in equal measure. As Daniel swam back toward the pier, droplets sparkling on his skin under the sunlight, he noticed their tense silence. Pulling himself up, he approached them slowly, water dripping onto the wood between them. His smile softened, his voice low. "You see it as chaos. We see it as challenge. That's why we're human." He extended a wet hand toward them, knowing they would recoil but still offering. The aliens drew back instinctively, afraid of contamination, yet unable to look away from the quiet power in his gesture. In that moment, Counselor Vorthen realized this encounter was no simple cultural exchange. It was a revelation. These beings, these humans, were not fragile primitives as some in the Council had claimed. They were tempered in danger, molded by the very elements most civilizations feared. They did not merely adapt, they thrived, and if they carried that spirit into the cosmos, then the galaxy was about to change forever. Night had begun to fall over the lake, painting the water in hues of violet and gold. The human children had gone home, their laughter fading into the distance, but Daniel remained on the pier with the alien delegation. A fire crackled nearby, its smoke curling into the twilight sky. The aliens stood rigid, their suits humming softly, their eyes never straying far from the darkening water. For them, the lake had transformed into something even more sinister with the absence of light. In darkness, the unknown multiplied, and their instincts screamed that predators lurked just beneath the surface. Daniel noticed their unease and stretched his arms with a smile. "It's beautiful at night. The water's colder, but it feels even more alive." He kicked off his shoes and prepared to dive again. Counselor Vorthen raised a hand sharply. "Enough. You've proven your point. Do not tempt death further." Daniel paused, tilting his head. "Tempt death? I'm not tempting anything. I'm just living." His words carried a weight the aliens couldn't parse, a philosophy both alien and unnervingly human. The fire's light flickered across the delegation's visors. Envoy Sarin whispered to his leader, "Why does he persist?" "The ritual seems endless." Vorthen's answer came slowly. "Because persistence is their nature. Every cycle, every breath, they push against limits." He turned his gaze to Daniel. "But there is more here than persistence. He wishes to teach us." Daniel, overhearing, chuckled as he lowered himself to sit cross-legged at the pier's edge. "I'm not teaching," he said gently. "I'm sharing. You came here to know what humanity is. This is us, unafraid of what others call impossible." Envoy Narell, ever the curious one, edged closer. His voice carried a tremor of both fear and fascination. "But what of death? Surely many perish in this act." Daniel nodded soberly, his smile fading. Yes, we lose people. Drowning is real. Nature takes its toll, but we don't stop because of fear. We teach our children, we train, we learn. Each generation gets stronger, more capable. We honor those we lose by pushing forward. His voice carried the weight of experience, of countless unnamed stories hidden beneath his words. The aliens grew quiet at this confession. For them, safety was supreme. Entire civilizations had built their futures around eliminating risk, constructing sterile barriers between themselves and the hazards of existence. To them, loss was unacceptable, an abomination to be prevented at any cost. Yet here was a species that accepted death as part of growth. The thought unsettled them to their cores. You embrace danger, even though it takes lives, Sarin murmured. We avoid it so we may endure. Daniel looked at him with calm intensity. And maybe that's why we're not just enduring. We're thriving. As the night deepened, stars emerged, scattered across the heavens. The aliens tilted their heads back, recognizing constellations their ships had mapped long ago. Yet somehow the sky seemed different when viewed from this primitive world. Through human eyes, Daniel lay back on the pier, staring upward, his wet hair still glistening from his last dive. Out there, he said softly, is the same as this lake. Fast, cold, and dangerous, but we'll dive into it all the same. Because we want to see what's beneath the surface. Forthin felt the words settle into him like stones sinking into deep water. He imagined human vessels hurling themselves into uncharted voids with the same reckless joy as Daniel diving into a lake. He imagined human colonies braving hostile worlds, laughing at conditions that would kill others. He imagined humanity spreading not because it was easy but because it was hard. His breathing quickened within the mask, and he wondered if they had underestimated this species to a dangerous degree. The fire crackled louder as Daniel sat up again. He reached for a flask and drank, then offered it toward them. They recoiled instinctively, scanners warning of contamination. Daniel shrugged and took another swig. See? Another thing you'd call poison. But for us it's warmth. It's tradition. He smiled wryly. We're not fragile, counselor. We're stubborn. That's why we're still here after everything this planet threw at us. His words resonated, echoing through the silence until only the chirping of insects and the gentle lapping of waves remained. Envoy Narel's curiosity finally overcame his fear. He crouched down beside Daniel, though the pier groaned under his armored weight. If this is humanity, he asked carefully, then what do you seek in the stars? Daniel didn't answer right away. He gazed at the constellations again, then said simply, the same thing we seek in the water. Challenge, discovery, life in all its forms. We dive because we want to know. And when we find something dangerous, we learn how to swim in it. The answer sent shivers through Narel's exosuit. A sudden splash in the darkness startled the aliens. They turned, alarm rising, but Daniel only laughed. A fish had leapt free of the water, glittering in starlight before vanishing again. Even the creatures here are fearless, Daniel remarked. The aliens scanned desperately, certain the beast was a threat. Daniel shook his head, amused. To you, everything is danger. To us, it's opportunity. His voice carried no arrogance, only truth spoken plainly, and that truth unsettled the delegation more than threats ever could. Counselor Vorthin's internal communicator buzzed with urgent signals from their orbiting command ship. The council demanded answers. What had they learned? What did they fear? What did they hope? He stared at Daniel for a long moment before muting the channel. He could not yet explain what humanity was, for he was still trying to understand it himself. All he knew was that this man, drenched in lake water and starlight, represented something larger than Earth itself. Something that would ripple across the galaxy. Daniel stretched, then stood once more at the edge of the pier. His silhouette cut against the stars, strong and unyielding. He looked back at them with a grin. One more dive before the night's done. And without waiting for approval, he leapt into the darkness, vanishing with a splash into waters the aliens considered lethal. They rushed to the edge, their hearts pounding, but beneath the rippling waves they saw nothing. Only the reflection of stars danced upon the surface. Seconds dragged like hours as they waited. When Daniel finally emerged, he raised his arms high, triumphant. The water dripped like molten silver in the firelight. Still alive, he called cheerfully, his laughter carrying across the lake. The aliens felt their breath catch, not because of relief, but because of awe. This was not recklessness. This was something deeper, an unshakable defiance of fear itself. And in that moment they realized the most dangerous thing about humanity was not their technology, nor their weapons, but their refusal to ever stop diving into the unknown. Dawn came quietly, the first rays of sunlight breaking across the surface of the lake. Mist clung low to the water, giving the scene an ethereal stillness. The alien delegation stood exactly where they had been the night before, unable to sleep, unable to leave, transfixed by the human who had spent hours diving into what they still considered a deadly abyss. Daniel now sat wrapped in a towel, sipping hot coffee, as though nothing unusual had happened. The aliens, in contrast, looked as though they had aged centuries in a single night. Counselor Vorthen's voice rasped through his mask. "You defy survival itself." Daniel chuckled, steam rising from his cup. "No, we embrace it. Survival isn't about hiding from danger. It's about facing it head-on and learning how to live through it." He gestured to the lake, now shimmering under the rising sun. "This water is dangerous, sure, but it's also life. To us it's both, and we choose to see the life in it, not just the death." His words pierced them sharper than any blade. Envoy Nirel's eyes shone with something unfamiliar. Admiration. "If your kind truly sees danger this way, then there is no limit to what you may attempt." His voice trembled with awe. Daniel nodded, his smile tempered by sincerity. "That's the point. We don't stop at safe. Safe is just the beginning. Every challenge we've ever faced, fire, storms, hunger, disease, we didn't just endure. We found a way to turn them into strengths." He raised his cup as if toasting. This is just water. Imagine what we'll do with the stars." The delegation exchanged uneasy glances. Saren muttered, "This explains the reports. Your rapid expansion. Your willingness to colonize hostile environments. You do not see barriers as barriers. You see them as invitations." The realization chilled him, but it also ignited a strange spark of respect. Few civilizations in the Concordat thought this way. Most sought only to preserve themselves. But humans were something else entirely. Daniel rose to his feet, stretching as the sun warmed his skin. "You came here expecting labs, weapons, proof of power. But I wanted to show you something simpler. Power isn't always in what we build, it's in what we endure. What we embrace. That's why we swim. That's why we dive. Because for us, the unknown isn't an enemy, it's a friend." He walked to the pier again, barefoot, leaving wet footprints across the boards like signatures of defiance. The alien stepped back instinctively as he prepared for another dive. This time, though, he paused and looked at them. "I don't expect you to follow me. I know your species isn't built for this. But remember what you saw here today. Remember that when humans face danger, we don't freeze, we jump. And that's why we'll survive whatever's waiting out there in the galaxy." His voice carried with it not arrogance, but quiet certainty. It was the voice of someone who believed every word, because his species had lived it for millennia. Counselor Vorthen felt his throat tighten. He had lived through countless diplomatic encounters, had seen warlords boast of armies, scientists flaunt inventions, rulers display riches. None of it had shaken him as much as this. A single man, diving into water that should have killed him, had shattered centuries of belief. He realized with a heavy heart that humanity's true weapon was not technology. It was their fearless spirit. A spirit that could not be contained by fear or poisoned by danger. A spirit that could not be drowned. Daniel bent his knees, smiled at them one last time, and dove gracefully into the misty water. The splash echoed like a heartbeat across the lake. For a long moment, the alien stood frozen, staring at the rippling surface. Then slowly, Vorthen exhaled. "They are not what we thought," he whispered. "They are more." His companions nodded silently, their instruments forgotten, their fears unsettled but forever changed. Humanity had revealed itself not through machines or armies, but through the simple act of defying death with joy. When Daniel emerged, he waved at them casually, droplets sparkling in the morning light. "See, still here," he called. His laughter carried on the breeze, light yet unyielding. The aliens watched in silence, and though none dared say it aloud, each one understood. This was not just swimming. This was prophecy. If humans treated death itself as an ocean to be conquered, then the stars held no barrier strong enough to hold them back. The delegation returned to their ship hours later, but their thoughts remained anchored to the lake. In their official reports, they spoke cautiously of human resilience, of cultural rituals involving immersion in hostile environments. But deep down in the private chambers of their hearts, they knew the truth. Humanity was not reckless. Humanity was relentless. And when they finally dove into the galaxy, nothing, no poison, no storm, no void, would ever stop them.